On November 10, 2008, Ryanair Flight 410 set off from Frankfurt, Germany, en route to Rome's Ciampino airport with 172 passengers and crew on board. The captain, an experienced pilot with nearly 10,000 hours of flight time, was accompanied by a first officer who had only been with the company for 6 months. As the plane approached Rome, the first officer informed the captain of the approach procedure, while the captain noted the good weather conditions. As they descended through 17,000 feet, the captain gave the first officer the opportunity to fly the aircraft manually for the rest of the journey. As the plane lined up for landing on the runway, disaster struck. The captain saw a large flock of birds directly in front of the aircraft, which the first officer described as a black cloud that came from below. The captain quickly initiated a go-around, activating the engine's take-off go-around mode. However, the engines did not produce the necessary thrust to go around, but rather slowed down. The birds could not be avoided, and the aircraft collided with them just over the runway. The engine's failure to produce sufficient thrust caused the plane to not be able to climb, leading the pilots to ignore the rest of the go-around checklist and focused on finding the safest way to land. The captain took control and tried to keep the nose of the plane up, but the aircraft was going too slow and rapidly descended towards the runway. It hit the ground hard, with the rear fuselage and main left landing gear taking the impact first. The right main landing gear and left engine also hit the runway, and the left-hand landing gear collapsed. The pilots of Ryanair Flight 410 used the brakes, spoilers, and left engine thrust to slow the plane during the ground roll. The aircraft came to a stop just 50 meters from the end of the runway, and the engines were shut off less than 15 seconds later. Passengers were evacuated, with a few suffering minor injuries. The plane was significantly damaged and was later deemed a total loss. Rescue crews arrived at the scene to find the aircraft in a charred condition, with its engines torn apart by the impact. Thankfully, no one died in the crash, but some passengers were injured and taken to local hospitals for treatment. An investigation into the Ryanair Flight 410 crash identified a series of mistakes and missteps that contributed to the disaster. The captain had not followed proper go-around procedures, and the first officer had not received sufficient training to handle the emergency. The investigation also revealed that the aircraft's engines had not been properly maintained. The cause of the accident was determined to be the collision with a dense flock of birds on final approach. A total number of 86 impacts were counted. However, the investigation also raised questions about whether the outcome needed to be as severe as it was. In hindsight, it was determined that it would have been safer for the pilots to continue with their landing approach rather than initiating a go-around. If they had done so, the damage to the engines would likely have been limited to the fan blades at the front of the engine and would not have extended to the engine's core. This would have allowed the aircraft to land safely and with relatively normal force. The crash was so forceful and destructive because the pilots initiated a go-around, which further damaged the engines by using a high power setting that caused them to stop producing thrust. This tragic accident serves as a reminder of the importance of following proper procedures and maintaining equipment to prevent similar disasters from occurring. The Ryanair Flight 410 crash highlights the need for thorough training and careful maintenance to ensure the safety of passengers and crew. The main question on the minds of investigators after the Ryanair Flight 410 crash was why the captain decided to go around, considering the plane was just seconds from landing when it hit the birds. In interviews with investigators, the captain provided several reasons for his decision. The aircraft was heavy, at over 61 tons, which would increase the required stopping distance on the runway. Additionally, the impact with the birds may have caused damage to the undercarriage and brakes, further increasing the stopping distance. The plane also had a tailwind and was approaching a shorter runway at Ciampino Airport. All these factors increased the risk of overshooting the runway if the crew continued the approach. The captain believed that a go-around would give them time to assess the situation and possibly make an approach to a longer runway at Fiumicino Airport, which was nearby. Above all, the captain felt that the safety of the landing was in doubt after the bird strike, and that, as they were trained, in case of doubt, go around. The go-around procedure ultimately resulted in the plane experiencing an aerodynamic stall, causing it to crash at the halfway point of the runway. One passenger described the chaotic scene on Ryanair Flight 410 after it crashed. A flight attendant was running down the aisles yelling, "Nobody panic! Nobody panic!" causing passengers to become agitated and try to look out the windows to see what was happening. The crew opened the front and rear doors and deployed the slides, and the passenger, who had stitches on his knee, was instructed to go to the wing exit. His mother, who was behind him, yelled that he couldn't jump because of his injury, but a kind gentleman offered to catch him. The passenger sat on the downward slope edge of the wing and was caught before hitting the ground. Shuttle buses arrived to take the passengers to the terminal, where they learned that brake fluid had somehow gotten into the air conditioning system, causing mist in the cabin. The passenger didn't believe the issue warranted the panic displayed by the flight attendant, especially since they were already on the ground. During the investigation into the crash, it was revealed that the captain had not intended to choose a 10-degree flap setting and was unaware that he had done so. This is consistent with the startle effect, which is a natural response to an unexpected situation, such as a bird strike down during landing. The final report on the accident blamed the crew's lack of instruction on how to respond to a bird strike during landing for the startle effect. The final report on the Ryanair Flight 410 crash made recommendations on how to deal with bird strikes during takeoff and final approach. It suggested that pilots be provided with guidelines and training procedures on the topic, including discussing bird strike risks during takeoff and approach briefings when operating at airports with known or expected bird activity. In the event of a single or multiple bird strikes during the final approach phase, it is preferable to land with the lowest possible engine power setting rather than initiating a go-around procedure. The report also recommended considering that engine damage or malfunction might prevent the go-around maneuver from being completed safely, making it impossible to land on the runway if initiated. Specific training was also recommended to help pilots cope with the startle effect, especially during critical phases of flight such as approach and landing.